dear ones, it's a Halloween story today. The camera's playing up. I don't know what to do with it. I think it's reflecting the mood of myself and what's going on at the moment. Anyway, today is a little story, a little Halloween story about my mum and how she left and what have you. So it's appropriate. I've got my Scorpio colours on today, reds and blacks. I never wear black. It's not my colour, but it felt appropriate today because there's a lot of, you know, my last video, it's not a death exactly, but it is a bit of a dour time, a doer time, isn't it? Of witches and stuff like that. Anyway, here I am talking about Mum. She died about 10 years ago actually. We never did have a very good relationship. She wasn't my real mother. As you know from a previous video, I was a walk-in, so it was a difficult, there was something not quite there, but she had to be my mother and I had to be her daughter, so that was how it was. But when I was in Switzerland, in an astrological seminar, an astrologer told me, your mother didn't want you when you were born. And I immediately had a very mini breakdown. I was quite ill actually with the shock of it all, and I had a job to get back to England. And then many years later, just before she died really, I went to visit, and I got a sister, and she obviously, Mum wasn't very well. She was obviously towards the end and mentally not very well, and she looked at me and said, I don't want you. I want your sister, Margaret. So I've never forgotten that. You try to tell yourself it's not true, but obviously she said it, and it made sense to me because I never felt as though she was very fond of me, although she did her best. So anyway, ultimately she died, and I couldn't get to the funeral. It was a weird thing. I just moved home, and I rang her to say I'd moved, I'd got in safely, and she said, I'll ring you back, I'm not very well. Well, she didn't ring back, and about a week or two later, brother-in-law rings up and said, your mother's gone. I said, gone where? Well, she's died. Now, this is a pretty peculiar setup, which will take another video to talk about. You know how things happen at funerals and people die and people start scrabbling and what have you. There was a very peculiar situation that obviously she had turned to my sister at the end. My brother-in-law was not a very nice character, and he just ran me to tell mother had died, and I couldn't get to the funeral. I was too ill to drive down. It was down from about 100 miles or so, and I couldn't get there. My daughter went, and she was the only one who followed the funeral car. So it was a very strange situation all round. Mum came to visit me by the side of my bed not long after, but the weirdest thing was that I had a dream, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional. I had a dream and it was so, I say it's a dream, but it was so real. It was so real. The sun was shining, it was a bright day, and I went to see her in her home in Bristol. I used to go and visit sometimes. I went up the driveway, quite a large house, walked up the driveway, woo, like I used to, waiting for the 2 cups on the table, and there they were, 2 cups on the table, and Mum, bright and breezy, hair all curled like she used to look, and we talked for a little while, and then she reached out to me, and it was a very odd sensation that she was all bright and sunny except from the elbow down to her hand. It was very decayed, and it was only a couple of weeks after she died, but this was significant that I think she was sorry for what she'd done, and she was trying to get hold of me, and that was a very negative side of her that came across. And I said, oh Mum, don't, I said, I forgive you. And with that she vanished. I've got to put my glasses on a bit. So, and I think I've mentioned this before in a previous video how I helped her to move on. She was obviously very afraid, and like most people are, the last few moments. My dad was terribly afraid, but Mum was, I can't explain it. It was just, my daughter came to see me when I was living quite distance away, a few weeks afterwards actually, and she said, Mum, she said, I'm having visions of Nanny. She doesn't know where she is, she doesn't know what to do. So I said, well, we'll just stand together and say a little prayer. I'm not clairvoyant, as you know, but my daughter is. And we just lit a candle, did a ritual again. I love my rituals. And we just said this little prayer, and I could see Mum walking towards me. She said, what's happened to the dog? She had a little dachshund dog, and I think my sister took the dog actually. So we had very, very few words, and she said, I don't know where I am, I don't know what to do. So, so I said, well, just look round, Dad will come and get you. And blow me, he did. Bless his heart, he died a year before, and he came towards her just as he was, Dad, you know, in a sports jacket, and took her linked into her arm and took her away. So I felt really that was a kind of goodbye, but I think she still, it's only a few months ago actually that I was moving out again and I had a vision of my mum sitting at a table with 2 dinner plates. I've got some very special Spanish brightly coloured dinner plates, and she had one in front of her and the other one was next to her, and she was obviously waiting for me to come and have a meal with her. I said, oh Mum, I'm not, it's not time, I've got a bit of a while to go yet, you're going to have to wait. So all these little instances have come about, and I did go to a spiritualist church actually to see if I could connect with her in the very early days. And the mediums, and I've got a lady here who's pleased that she hasn't got bunions anymore. All these little stories, you know, they're interesting to me, and they are kind of a proof of life after death, I guess. I haven't seen her for quite some time, because of course the more time goes on, the less I'm not sure I grieved her really, nor did my dad. It's quite odd, isn't it? So, but as time goes on, I did say to her, look, I'm not happy, Mum. I said, you didn't want me, so please don't come to see me. And that's how it is now. So, but today, of course, we're coming up to the All Souls, praying for those who've departed. And I will do a little ritual for both my parents. I think my dad and I were perhaps closer, I don't know. But it is important perhaps to, I don't know, talk about letting go and things like that, and how do you let go? I suppose you just have to accept that the situation was as it was. She did the best she could. I mean, I do have lots of obviously positive memories, and I think I was just too much for her really, because of my soul connection of being a walk-in, a play-in and all that. Mum was a very simple soul really, and I think she too was rather screwed up, you might say, emotionally. You know, that was her generation and her time. My dad was too. So I had 2 quite difficult parents, but they were necessary for my own soul growth, if you know what I mean. So on a one level, I forgive her for that, because she did the best she could, and it was how it had to be. But there's still another part of me that really hasn't quite accepted not being wanted, and I'm still working on that. I'm not quite sure what she really meant, but I know my sister, it's personalities, isn't it? I have a sister, and they got on much better than I did with Mum, and we were always fighting about something. And I used to write letters, which is not a good idea. So that's quite complicated, but I'm just thinking of her today, and of course the Scorpio time. I've got a daughter as well, that's another story. I've had to do so much letting go, but it's also, and we all have, there's no particular reason. I don't think you can rationalise it. You can't say, why has this happened, why did that? It just has to be, and I think this is the way things are at the moment. Things have to be, and you really can't rationalise or analyse it. You have to accept that you do the best you can, and we leave certain people in our lives, you know, because we change. I've changed a hell of a lot in the last few years. You wouldn't have known me 5 years ago, probably. Fortunately. Anyway, there we are. I'm a bit fragile today, as you can probably sense. I don't know what's wrong with the camera. I'm all blurred. That's probably how I feel, a bit blurred. So I'm going to go now. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Well, enjoyed is the wrong word. Found it interesting, I suppose. And I've enjoyed doing it because it helps me to share these things. And You get to understand yourself more, don't you? So anyway, darlings, on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. Au revoir. Oh, 10 minutes. What do you think of my lovely rose? Wrong side. I had to cheer myself up with the colour red. Okay, God bless for now then. Take care. Bye bye.